Well, this is a first for the channel, but thanks to Ubisoft ANZ, I got to spend some hands-on time, playing around with Star Wars Outlaws. And after seeing countless preview videos by some of my fellow creative friends, breaking down what's happening in the trailers and analysing the gameplay myself, Star Wars Outlaws still has me excited, but it's also kinda not what I expected too. Now, what you're going to see in this video is my gameplay footage, so if you're seeing Kay miss shots, fall off the speeder bike, or get lost, that is not a gameplay issue, that is a player issue, that's me.
It's my first day.
Well, why didn't you say go woo?
Now, as we already know, Star Wars Outlaws is developed by Massive Games, the team behind The Division, and published by Ubisoft. Star Wars Outlaws is a open world third-person shooter, again, as we already know. But Ubisoft invited me to take a look at Outlaws, and we were given access to an early playthrough section of the game through certain points, and the story has already kind of started, and I won't be going into any story moments or breaking down any cutscenes or what's happened at this point, as I think that needs to be experienced by you the player. But we were given early access to a portion of the game to explore the open world of Tashara, which is a planet that is actually made for Star Wars Outlaws. Now, Ubisoft catered to console players and mouse and keyboard players, and I played this preview footage using a Xbox controller, and I will get to the mouse and keyboard gameplay at the end of the video. Now, we got access to a 3-hour section of an early story plot point of exploring the new world of Tashara, which looks pretty damn cool, and I kinda like that the devs got to work with Lucasfilm Games to make their own planet in the Star Wars universe that is now canon, where they can create the wildlife, they can create the tone, the city, the level of Imperial occupation, the vibe that Tashara has out in its wild planet is pretty, and it makes you want to explore. But it's also kind of the opposite when you go into its city walls, because it feels claustrophobic and crammed in. When you're inside the city, you'll see Imperial patrols just stroll through the city and shake down civilians. Crime organisations will guard their outposts, and there are a load of activities to do like gamble or place a bark to make money, as there are more than a few things to spend your credits on.
You wanna buy some death sticks?
But when out and about in the world of Tashara, your main character Kay has access to a speeder bike, which acts a bit like, say, the horses in the Red Dead series, or the motorbike in Days Gone, and it is your main mode of transport when exploring a world. The speeder bike is used for general exploration, moving from mission to mission if you need to move outside of the city walls, side missions and general objectives that just pop up while you're exploring. Now, the speeder can be customized with upgrades that will give you more abilities, like a boost for example, and it does have some small cosmetic changes, but it looks like the speeder will retain its sort of cafe racer bike stylings to it. Its handling, on the other hand, I did find it a bit loose. Now, it could be because that the bike that we're using at this point in the game is the starter bike, and when you upgrade it you will have better control, but I found myself constantly hitting things and flying off the bike.
You probably should ignore that.
And this was mostly, yes, due to me looking backwards as I was driving, but it did happen in one mission where it felt like a cinematic moment and I just fell off my bike.
He's already dead.
But the speeder does move fast, the environment around the bike with dust kicking up is a cool effect, and Nix having his own little spot at the end of the bike is cool, and don't worry, I will come back to Nix. But the gameplay is also a bit familiar. If you play The Division, Star Wars Outlaws will look and feel familiar. It is a third-person shooter, just like The Division, but the weapon combat feels similar to that of Star Wars Battlefront. Your blasters will overheat, and you'll need to cool them down with the little Gears of War style micro game. As many as well have said in the past, the character we play as in Star Wars Outlaws, Kay, isn't a Jedi, so she can't take too many hits, and I found myself failing a bit of combat because I would treat her like an action hero rather than a low-level smuggler. After 2 to 3 hits, I found myself retreating and being a bit more careful with my positioning and what I was doing. Kay's main weapon is her pistol, and it's a little similar to, say, Han Solo's main weapon is the DL-44 blaster, and the pistol works exactly like you think it would. The standard plasma being your bread and butter for standard enemies, and use the weapon too much, it'll overheat and you need to cool it down like you would in the Battlefront games. There's also the ion shot, which is used for shields and droids and environmental puzzles, which yes, it does have its uses. And the other main ability that we got to use was the stun shot, that when hitting a target, it would knock them out. However, the stun shot has about a 2-minute cooldown, so you need to be careful when aiming, because if you miss the shot, you might alert some guards. What I did find kinda cool though was the ion shot also works great at stunning enemies on the spot, sorta like the effect of hitting someone with a taser, and that would allow me as Kay to rush in and do some melee combat damage to them. Kay can also pick up enemy weapons herself, or ask Nyx to do that if she's pinned down, and I gotta say it really does come in handy. Now there were some moments where I was just locked in a corner with some enemies and had nothing but a pistol, but I asked Nyx to go and retrieve a blaster rifle for me, and it was super useful. But to my surprise, Star Wars Outlaws stealth mechanics are actually pretty damn good, and they're a bit like, say, Splinter Cell Blacklist. While sure there isn't a stealth light meter like in the Splinter Cell games, or the camera doesn't turn into a black and white mode like it does in Conviction, which low-key would have been kinda dope, but the stealth system in Outlaws is overall pretty straightforward. Hide in the shadows, get behind boxes, all that standard stuff, and the stealth is a requirement too for the game, that's something to note. So it doesn't look like you can overly avoid stealth for some missions and some side missions, as you do need to sneak into areas. But enemies do have a detection gauge, a bit like say in the Far Cry games, but rather than the gauge filling and then the guards investigate the area, guards will investigate the area about 5 seconds or so, even if they catch a glimpse at you, so you kinda need to keep moving. But the overall combat, while in an early build of the game and towards the start of the game too, I found it felt a little loose personally. Now it might be that when I'm at home playing my games with a controller, I'm using an Xbox Elite controller and you can sort of tighten the stick stiffness on those things, or it might be that the controller I was using was well loved and a bit old, or maybe because it's an early preview build of the game, but I found Kay's movements were just that little bit floaty. However, when chatting with my mates about their experience with Outlaws, they used the mouse and keyboard settings rather than using a controller, and they found the controls on a mouse and keyboard smooth like a good whiskey. And I think when Outlaws releases, I've got to try it with both a mouse and keyboard and a controller to sort of get a gauge for this, as it might not be a game issue, it might just be a personal issue for me. However, space combat though, damn dude, like while the combat feels familiar with the Division style of mechanics, well maybe not mechanics but familiarity, and the stealth movements are a bit like Splinter Cell in the Star Wars light game, the space combat and traversal feels like Battlefront 2, and personally, I love the space combat in Battlefront 2. You get to control the speed of your ship, your engines, your weapons, it feels really nice in hand. But the one piece of advice that we were given before jumping into playing Outlaws was use Nyx. And look dude, that was the best advice. Nyx can open doors for you, they can distract guards, pick up weapons, sabotage items on guards. Nyx can activate the grenades in a goon's pocket, blowing them up. It absolutely changes the way that you can approach a mission. But my thing with Nyx though, is you can totally forget to use them. They are a totally cute side character, but they can be forgotten about, but the dude is proper useful. Like if you're getting stuck and you don't know where to go, you can use Nyx's highlighted enemy sense ability to sort of see what's around the corner a little bit. Or you can ask Nyx to go and open something for you, or go retrieve a weapon if you're stuck in the middle of combat.
Nyx, the blaster. Good boy.
But the main draw for Outlaws, I will say it's for some people, and I would say, yeah, maybe myself too, but the reputation system with different crime syndicates, and I think that's where the real meat and potatoes for this game is. Now, I don't want to spoil anything, and I'm going to cover it more in depth when the review comes out, but let's just say it's like keeping plates spinning, and those plates can shoot you at any time. So you'll need to decide sort of what crime syndicate you want to work with, as well as dealing with the consequences of working with that faction. But Star Wars Outlaws drops in less than a month's time from now, and thank you again to my mates at Ubisoft Australia for inviting me out to play an early build of Outlaws, and I just want to say thanks. As you can tell though, I am more than excited for its launch and keen to delve deeper into Kay's story. The overall gameplay pulls from Splinter Cell, Division, Some open world aspects of Red Dead, or at least Red Dead comes to mind for me, maybe because Tashara's got a little bit of that westerny vibe to it, and the space traversal and combat feels like it's been pulled out of Squadrons and Battlefront 2, and I absolutely love those games. But whether you're on the fence about Star Wars Outlaws, or you're glued to every piece of Star Wars Outlaws news, always remember to play with each other and play with yourself.